Welcome to Take Me Out, the ultimate podcast about ballparks and the baseball experience. It's May 14th, 2025. I'm Alexandra Ellis, and I'm joining my friend Timothy Malcolm.
What's up, baseball fans, and welcome to Take Me Out, episode number 15 of our podcast. I'm Tim, and that is Alex. How are you today, Alex?
Doing pretty good. Had a pretty good day today. Did a lot of cleaning around my apartment, cleaned out my car, watched part of the Astros get demolished. But hey, it's another day.
Sometimes our teams lose.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop bitching about it one of these days, but apparently it's not today.
Well, I still think they'll be fine. They always find their way to be fine.
Scrappy dudes.
Crazy dumb Astros. Good though. I'm fine. All things are good here. I think we were talking about maybe going to see an Astros game together in a couple of weeks. I believe that's in the cards.
For sure. I'm excited.
I think we're going to see them play the A's. Is
that right? Yes. It's a 2-game series, I think, is what we're looking at.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. So we'll look at that. And I'm starting to kind of figure out, can I get to Arlington at some point pretty soon? Like, go see that ballpark again? It's been a couple of years. So I went to Globe Life for the first time in 21, because 20, obviously, they opened in pandemic, and they were like the only ballpark that was really hosting a lot of baseball at that time. They were hosting the World Series that year, all that jazz.
Yeah.
And then 21, they were the first ballpark to be like, masks, who cares? And that was a little bit nuts. But so I waited a couple months before I finally went to baseball. And I did get there by the end of the season in 21. And I was, not very impressed by the park. It was my first time there, though. So I was open to judgment and just waiting for things.
It's just huge. It's huge.
It's a big park. I went the next year in 22, or did I go in 23?
I went in 23. I think the Astros beat them on Labor Day? It was near the end of the season, but I was at one of those games, and it was great.
Okay, well, I forget which year I went, but it was the year, maybe it was 23, because the Phillies opened there, and I was there for that. I think it was 23. No, 22. It was 22. It was 22. The Phillies opened there, and after that first series, I was like, oh, the Phillies are going to be bad this year. This is terrible. And then they went on to the World Series, so, who knows?
Yeah.
But I haven't been there since, so it's time for me to kind of go back there and see what has changed about that park and really, like, dig into it a little bit more. So that'll be fun to do at some point very soon. And that's what I'm up to. I mean, that's about it. I mean, we're now a quarter of the way through the baseball season.
It's going by too fast. I don't like it. I mean,
it always happens this way, And then you get to like July, like late July, and you're like, all right, when is September? When are we getting to the good stuff?
Yeah.
So cherish it while you can.
Yeah, for sure, always.
But I think we have like a good sense of who's pretty good this year. Like National League, you got the Dodgers obviously are going to be there. The Mets are playing very well. The Phillies should be in the race there. The Padres look like they're going to be the Padres this year. And then you kind of got like this mix of teams. Like, well, the Giants kind of like stay up there. The Diamondbacks are pretty decent. The Cardinals are playing maybe above their heads, maybe not. Who knows?
The Cardinals have 9 in a row now, I think.
Yeah, it's 9 in a row. I think. Well, as of tonight, they beat the Phillies. They beat my team tonight. So
sorry.
9. Yeah, that's okay. It happens. And then the American League. It looks like what you got. Who's playing really well in the American? Because I have no idea.
I think Seattle is at the top of the AL West right now. I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. Seattle.
Yeah. I know they're playing, and then Oakland's not doing bad either.
No, they've been actually pretty good this year. I'm very, very. I've been very impressed by the A's this year. The Yankees have, I think, still kind of the class of the American League, and I'm surprised at how poor the Orioles have been this year. It's really sad to watch that. The Tigers have had a very good season as well. Coming back from last year, the Guardians are kind of hanging in there. The Phillies took 2 out of 3 from them recently, but it feels like, the Yankees will be there. The Tigers look like they're going to go back there. The Guardians look like they'll probably be hanging around. And then I really do think the Astros, like, they will find a way to overcome the Mariners and, the threat of the A's, and it'll be fine.
Yeah.
They'll be fine.
We'll always find a way. We're kind of that pesky team that never goes away. I hope this year, because I know one of these seasons luck's going to run out, but I'm just kind of enjoying the ride right now.
Well, speaking of the Astros, we are going to actually be hanging out here in Houston for this episode because it's a very special time in the history of Houston baseball we're going to have a special guest coming up very soon, Mike Acosta, who I guess you would call him the historian of the Houston Astros, the historian, if you will, of the Houston Astros. I mean, he actually had the job for several years of Houston Astros historian employed by the Astros, but he also is just a wealth of baseball knowledge. And he is someone who has been, deeply entrenched in following the story of the Astrodome, the past, the present, and the future of it, whatever that might be. And we had a great conversation with Mike, and it's going to be all about the Astrodome, as it is now 60 years since it opened, 1965, the eighth wonder of the world, whatever you want to call it, a modern marvel, an incredible feat of architecture, the template, the blueprint for so many parks that came after it in the 1960s and 70s especially. But we're going to talk about 60 years of the Astrodome, past, present, and future, with Mike Acosta coming up very, very soon here on Take Me Out. Great conversation we had.
Really good conversation. Like I know sometimes, like when people record podcasts, they're like, we're going to air this interview that they haven't done yet, but we already interviewed him, and it's just, I could have listened to him for another 3 hours. I mean,
taking people behind the curtain. What's going on?
Yeah,
here?
It was. Sorry about that, but yeah, it's an absolutely incredible conversation. And again, I could just listen to him talk forever, because it sounds like he just knows so much more, even though he talked to us for, what was it, close to an hour just about the dome, and like there's still so much more that he knows about it. It's incredible. It's really admirable.
It was one of those conversations where, like, I asked a question and he just started talking for like 17 minutes about it.
Yeah.
Like, he just went on.
And no complaints. I'm just like, keep going, man. It was awesome. Yeah.
Info. It was like just interesting stuff. So that's a great conversation.
And he's so passionate about it too, which just made it so much better.
And if you ever had like any like interest in the Houston Astrodome and what it meant and the history of it and what's going on right now with it, because it's still standing, you should listen to this conversation, because it really is kind of a definitive conversation about the Houston Astrodome. Just put it that way. But first, we're going to hop into what is new and fresh in the ballpark world. Let's get into ballpark news.
Ballpark news. The Maryland Stadium Authority approved several upgrades to Oriole Park at Camden Yards, including increasing the size of the current center field video board.
Did you have any idea that Oriole Park at Camden Yards had such a small scoreboard? And it was, I don't know if it's the original scoreboard. I think in 2008 they upgraded it a little bit. But
I had no idea.
Yeah.
But I went about 20 years ago, and like didn't notice much. I just noticed how, maybe it wasn't 20 years ago, not that much longer ago, but I just was amazed by how an amazing park it was. I didn't notice much about the video board. It's one of the best for sure.
But very interestingly, Oriole Park at Camden Yards has had an old video board for a long time now, and I mean it's funny because Oriole Park is the park that sort of changed the game as far as how ballparks are designed, at least in the 90s and 2000s, going into that more classic and retro modern style. And yet it's an old park because it opened in 1992, and they've changed some things about the park. And in fact, this past year, they moved the fences a little bit again and, made things higher again and that kind of thing. But the park is old. It's 33 years old now. Mm-hmm. And if you think about what parks are older, there aren't many that are older than it. I mean, there's obviously Fenway Park and Wrigley Field. Yeah. There's the contemporary, the mid-century parks. I don't know not contemporary. They're the
mid-century modern, if you want to take
mid-century parks. Yeah. The mid-century sort of super stadium parks of the 50s and 60s, Dodger Stadium, Angel Stadium, Kauffman Stadium in Kansas City. And then you have like the weird stadiums like Rogers Center and Tropicana Field that were just kind of part of the super stadium, into multi-purpose era, but like different ballparks in weird ways, different stadiums in different ways. And then Wright Field in Chicago, the former Guaranteed Rate Field where the White Sox play. Those are basically it. I mean, that's it. And then you have Camden Yards. And so it's a stadium that's sort of outdated in a weird way. There's like parts of it that are outdated. And the one thing that was very outdated about it was the video board is just old and it's small. And if you think about how much video boards have changed over the past couple decades, newer ballparks have enormous video boards. Like they're they're about like half, like it's like half the outfield length of these video boards. They're just tremendous big. And so I looked at, like, I was trying to see, like, what the size comparisons are. The new board that they're putting in Camden Yards, and this will be happening over the course of the season, it sounds like they're going to have it before the end of the year, is going to be 7,466 square feet in size. It will be the 12th largest video board when it is installed. Do you know what the largest video board is? Do you have any idea? Could you take a guess?
I'm going to assume Globe Life.
No, Globe Life does not have the largest.
Okay.
I don't think it's actually, it's one of the larger ones, but it's not in the top 5.
It was pretty big when I visited, but I mean, it's Dallas. I mean, that's how they do it, everything there. I have no idea.
So the video board at Citi Field in New York, the Mets left field video board is, you know how many square feet the video board is?
How many?
17,400 square feet.
It's a lot of video board. Oh,
it's
no.
Three times the size of the former video board at Citi Field, which was about 5,300 square feet.
Yeah, man, that's wild.
If you think about that, the Citi Field board is 17,000 square feet. The second place board is Comerica Park, the Tigers.
Mm-hmm.
Then the third place board is the Guardians. They just installed theirs, I think, this year in Cleveland. And the Phillies at Citizens Bank Park is the 4th. And then the Brewers is 5th. And I believe all these teams have installed video boards in the last 5 years, right? The Phillies got a new one a couple of years ago. And I think the Phillies board is 13,000 square feet, something like that.
Huh.
So you think about how this new board at Oriole Park is just a little more than half of the Phillies board at 7,000 plus square feet.
I can't wrap my brain around that. I mean,
so it's an upgrade, but it is nowhere near as big as the biggest ones in baseball. So, and I think part of that is because Oriole Park is sort of what it is now. You can't necessarily, I don't think you could build, I mean, I guess you could find a way to build bigger with Oriole Park and that outfield space, but it is so kind of dug in now, and it is so kind of mapped out and engineered that it's probably
some
pretty
limitations
hard to sort of move things around there now. So yeah, it's a small ballpark, right? So that's just the way it is. But I mean, it's crazy. So they're adding that. Also, they're adding some club level ribbon boards. The ribbon boards are basically like what you see on the foul lines, second level. They're the sort of the more narrow horizontal boards that go all the way across the foul line and have advertisements on them, and they change all the time and stuff like that. Those are the ribbon boards. And they're also getting a new right field video display on the right field wall. So instead of, I think there was maybe signage there in right field, or maybe there was a score. I forget what was out there in right field. They're going to put an LED board there instead. So they're changing something these are changes at Camden Yards that would have been new for a ballpark in 2013-14, so a decade ago. So they're finally catching up to the 2010s, the Orioles are. But I mean, look, when you have a ballpark like Camden Yards,
you don't want to do too much to it because it's in a great ballpark as it is.
Yeah, and even the small, I mean, it's not a small change into a video board, but a change like this, but that is not. It's not a hulking board that's going to change the entire look of the ballpark. It's enough. But that kind of small change will make it feel more updated, make it feel more like it's part of, the modern conversation. But it's still an amazing park, so it's totally fine. But these are upgrades that have to happen if you want to have a ballpark that's going to stick around for the next 20, 30, 40 years. And I would imagine Camden Yards is the park that they want to be there maybe forever, for as long as possible. So you got to do these things in time.
I don't blame them for wanting that. I wouldn't want to leave either. It's a great park, and I hope to go back and visit it again soon. I just don't know when.
Make the trip.
Yeah, it's going to be a trip. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it for sure. All right, moving on. There was a violent altercation at PNC Park last week.
Yeah, there was a violent altercation at PNC Park last week. So this was pretty shocking. There's video of it if you look on a couple of news sites. This was Sunday. The Pirates were playing the Braves at PNC Park. 2 fans at the game allegedly were harassing a female employee, which we had our episode last week about fan 10 commandments and how to act as a fan in the ballpark. And
they weren't listening.
we sort of said this, but we didn't say this explicitly. Don't harass the workers, especially female workers.
You shouldn't have to tell people
anybody.
that.
But yeah, I mean,
shouldn't have to tell people this.
I mean, come on. Now, it's all alleged. Again, this is all alleged stuff that hasn't been captured on video. But allegedly, they were harassing a female employee, and a male employee who was nearby tried to stop the situation. It got heated. There were punches that were thrown. One of the two fans was seen on video spitting onto the worker, like literally spitting onto the worker. And then the worker was seen on video removing his belt from his pants and whipping one of the fans with his belt.
That took a turn. I just thought more haymakers, but no, okay. Wow.
I don't at all.
Sorry, if you spit on me, something's going to happen. If you spit on me, something's going to happen. I don't blame that guy.
At the same time, I think I believe one of the news stations that I was watching the video, they were talking to some security official or a police official or something like that, who said something to the extent of, like, maybe it was a stadium official who said, I've worked in stadiums for years, and every year there's like one guy, there's something that happens, and you want to do something more than you're supposed to, but you don't do it. You hold back because you know that you need to take the high road, A, to like save your job, B, to not get any legal trouble, whatever, but you don't do it. This guy who works for the Pirates, or works at the ballpark, not for the Pirates, he probably works for whoever the vendor is at PNC Park, just decided, no, I'm going to like take off my belt and whip the guy, which is not funny. And
it's not funny, but
I don't want to do it. I don't condone it, but it is just, again, we've talked about this now with last week's episode, especially, and the Jaron Duran stuff that happened in Cleveland.
The stuff with Lance McCullers. I mean,
not ballpark related, but there was a fan who was on social media and made threats against Lance McCullers Jr. and his family after a bad start a couple days ago. I don't know if there's more of this happening, but it feels like we're hearing more about it. These really bad behaving fans, and sometimes because of this, bad behaving employees or bad behaving team officials or whatever it is in retaliation. It's just getting to a point where we need to have some conversations about how to behave at a ballpark.
Yeah.
And we tried to have that conversation last week with our 10 Commandments episode, but I guess people didn't listen to it yet.
Shame.
It's just all dumb. It's really dumb, and fans need to check themselves. And
seek
my
help,
God,
touch grass, all the things.
And my God,
take a deep breath.
Men of the world, not the women don't want to talk to you. The women don't want to talk to you.
No, I can tell you no, I don't want to. No, it's just as a woman, I question so many things. It's
starts to talk to you. If she starts to talk to you in a friendly way that is not like as an employee of a ballpark or whatever, like that's one thing. But if a woman is talking to you as an employee of a ballpark, or having a regular interaction that is going to take 5 seconds as a transaction between two people, that doesn't mean she wants you or that there's more going on there. Just move on with your life. Don't engage. Don't harass people. It's just, man, it's just dumb.
Yeah. Men. It's exhausting, and it's very frustrating to watch, and we all need to be better people. Just be a good person. That's all it is. It's not that hard. It doesn't cost you any money, too.
It's getting harder for people, it feels like.
It really is. But again, being a good person doesn't cost you a dime. All right, let's move on to Fenway. Fenway Park concession workers will vote next month on whether to strike.
Yes, so this is interesting news from Fenway Park. Unite Here, Local 26 workers, union workers, they are contracted with Aramark, which is the third-party provider of food and beverage services out in Fenway Park. And Aramark does the food and beverage for just about every team in baseball. There's a couple other vendors at a Delaware North and stuff like that, but Aramark is the biggest one that there is in the country. Apparently, these workers don't have a contract right now. The contract ended last year, I believe late last year, and they've been trying to negotiate Red Sox and Aramark and the workers, and the talks have been ongoing, but the sides are not there yet. They haven't come to anywhere near of a conclusion. The workers want more money. They want, right now they're making less than $20 an hour, and they're concerned about automated self-checkout machines and other items that could take away jobs. And so they're trying to, get what they look. The workers at ballparks do not work full-time. These are not full-time jobs.
No.
These aren't people who they're guaranteed to work 40 hours a week. I mean, look, food and beverage workers, as you know, Alex, they're not guaranteed to work 40 hours a week in a lot of cases. And so it is literally, you're trying to get as many hours as possible, and you're trying to get as much money as possible in these situations. Now, if you work in a ballpark as opposed to a restaurant or a bar, you're not making tips. You're working your salary, because nobody leaves a tip at a ballpark.
No.
They might leave a tip at the automated machine and stuff like that when they're doing the ATM, but a lot of cases are not. And sometimes, I would imagine it gets broken up in a different way at ballparks with the workers.
I would think so.
But the point is, workers at ballparks probably don't make a lot of money, and they're part-time jobs because they're seasonal jobs at that, because you only work 6 months out of the year, and then you're working 1 week on, and then you're off for a week, and then you're back on for a week, and then you're off for a week. And then when you're actually on for the week, maybe you're working 4 hours a night, maybe you're working 4 nights a week. So, it's just, more money is necessary for a lot of these workers. And so, they're trying to get more money. I mean, your thoughts, you know more about all of this than I do. Do you have thoughts about sort of the machinations here involved in this situation?
I mean, I'm hoping these people can figure it out. It is rough for them, because that's making less than $20 an hour. Because when people go to ball games, they don't think about tipping. Maybe they'll tip the bartender at the club they're sitting at, or they'll tip the person sitting, like if they're sitting at a nice fancy suite, they'll tip the person there. But the general public, when you walk up to a thing, let's say 2 hot dogs and 2 beers, they don't think about tipping. That doesn't really come to them. And I'm guilty of this too. When I go to the ballpark, if I see a longer line, I will 99% of the time I'll opt for the machines, like where you just make the order there, you pay on your phone. And I do tip on those, but it is, while the convenience is there, just thinking about it right now, I kind of feel bad, because those machines are replacing those employees, because you will find less stands, less stalls, less windows to talk to somebody. Well, you just put your order in there. That's what we're all replacing them now, because while they're not cheap to install, not cheap to run, I'm sure, it's like you don't have to pay the person that's working there. And it's kind of scary how the jobs are being replaced right now. And while you're doing it for convenience, it's like there's probably about 5 people's jobs you're affecting by using a machine like that.
That's true. I mean, we're seeing more of these automated machines and these automated vendors and the grab and go stuff, and you can scan your own items and all of that stuff. That takes away jobs. Plus, ballpark attendance is not, we're not getting sellouts at ballparks every night, right?
No.
So if you go to the upper level of any major league ballpark, chances are half of the vendors that you're going to go to are not even working. They're not in operation during that night. And in a lot of cases, those people aren't even seeing customers. I mean, yes, at Dodger Stadium and at Yankee Stadium and at Citizens Bank Park and Fenway Park, the upper level vendors are, they're working and they're getting customers and things like that. But at a lot of these parks, and I've been in them, even at Daikin Park in Houston, you walk the upper level and those aren't packed. People aren't waiting in line for 10 minutes for a hot dog. They are in and out. And that means there's not a lot of customers. That means there's not a lot of money going around. And again, it's a different structure probably at these ballparks with tips and stuff. But if your livelihood is coming to the ballpark to work and there's not a lot of customers at specific vendors, and they decide, well, we're going to, shut these guys down for the next week because they're not getting enough customers. It's all numbers, once you look at the data, you're like, well, we can afford to drop, 5 or 6 vendors for the night, because if we drop them, we don't have to run those vendors. We don't have to run the electricity, all that stuff. Yeah. And so that means those people who work there are not going to work there that night. And so you drop the people. So it's common sense, capitalism. It's, people, their jobs at risk here. So all this stuff matters. And so, I'm all for workers in this case getting what they deserve and getting the rights that they need and getting the money that they need, because in a lot of ways these ballpark jobs are what are holding some people on at this point. Sometimes working in restaurants is not feasible, or maybe, you can't hold that job because there's too many commitments, or you have
family
kids
at
at
home.
home, or whatever it is. And maybe the ballpark job is the thing that works because it's summertime or whatever. I don't know. But like, every case is different, and the more people we can have working at ballparks, the better. It just stinks that that's the case that happens at these ballparks. Now, hopefully, at Fenway, they can come to some sort of resolution. The vote is going to take place June 13th, 15th. If the workers, overwhelmingly vote yes, then they will strike, and we will see what happens at Fenway. I imagine they will probably try to either they will scramble very quickly to get workers to come back, and they'll come to a negotiation, or Aramark will just bring in people from somewhere else and have them work.
So that's what happens.
Yeah.
I don't know how much extra that's going to cost Aramark, but it's just with these big corporations, people are just numbers to them, and it's pretty sad. It's very sad.
Yeah. Hopefully there's some kind of resolution here, but yeah, it's keep a watch for this. We'll keep a watch on this and see if next month there is going to be some changes at Fenway Park, at least temporarily, with the vendors and how that all works. So that'll be an interesting story. But that's the news for Take Me Out, episode 15. And we do this every week. We go through the league and see what is popping, what's new. Next week on the show, we're going to actually go deeper into what's popping and what's new in the league. It is our Around the League, Around the Parks for the month of May 2025. We'll go all around the league and go through ballpark news and fun stuff and talk about some things in the next episode. But we'll be back in just a moment here on Take Me Out for the segment that we're going to do next. And that is going to be a conversation with Mike Acosta, the unofficial historian, and all those things of the Houston Astros. Stay with us. Welcome back to Take Me Out. Tim here, Alex there, and we have a guest here on this episode. What is it like to be somebody who has spent basically an entire life being a historian, being somebody who is so passionate about baseball that they have made it a life's work to help chronicle things, but also help push things into the future and also remember the past, all these amazing things. We are with Mike Acosta, who worked for many, many years with the Houston Astros and is a lifelong Astros fan. And we're going to talk to him about the Astrodome and Astros history and so many other things. Mike, welcome to Take Me Out.
Thanks, Tim. Good to see y'all.
So I guess start with your fandom. You born and raised in Houston?
Yeah, I'm a native Houstonian. I started going to Astro games. There's pictures of me late 70s, around 1979 or so. I was a toddler, and my dad took me to the games, and I was fascinated by the Astrodome. I was fascinated by the scoreboard in the Astrodome, the rainbow jerseys that they had, the orange hats, and it was just a fascinating place to be for me as a kid, to be there. And then I just grew up an Astros fan. I used to sit out on the front porch talking about the Astros with my grandfather. He lived in the Heights, and we used to sit out at night it was like no street lights, and it was just real dark, and we had the Astros game on, and you could hear Gene Elston or Milo Hamilton, and then we would have our own broadcast, and then my dad would take me to the games and my brother, and we were in the Astro Buddies until I couldn't be in the Astro Buddies anymore until I turned, through age 14, I think it was. And so I've been a lifelong Astros fan, and I was just always curious as to the 5 W's, the who, what, why, when, all that type of stuff. And spent a lot of time in the library, as a kid.
Growing up with the Astrodome, I grew up with Veterans Stadium in Philadelphia, so a very sort of, maligned stadium for a lot of people. The Astrodome, I got to see it on TV, and it always looked really interesting and really weird in some cases. But obviously, with the home run spectacular, the fireworks, the ways it innovated. Can you talk about sort of like growing up with the Astrodome and how it was sort of this innovative ballpark and this groundbreaking park in a lot of ways?
Yeah, it was truly innovative because there was no other structure that existed like it. You had the wooden ballparks, the original rounded ballparks. Some of those burned down. They went to steel. Yankee Stadium came around in 1928, I think it was, and you saw Fenway Park burn down and get rebuilt and steel structures. And then you get to the point where 1962, they start building Dodger Stadium. And that's probably the first, what you would call super stadium. But it was just a different era of stadium. But the Astrodome, when it came around, it was an idea that had been talked about for many decades, actually going back to the Dodgers when they were trying to replace Ebbets Field, which was a steel structure in Brooklyn, and they couldn't get anything done. And Walter O'Malley had this grand idea of putting a roof over a stadium, which is not revolutionary in itself. It's rather simple. All you have to have is some creativity and think, okay, let's put a dome on top of a stadium, but how do you do it? That's the engineering behind it, and how do you make it a reality? And that's what was the differential in Houston, is that they took that idea, really not from the Dodgers. It actually, I don't even think that the people who were involved with building the Astrodome, or the origin of the Astros or the Colt 45s at the time, I don't really think that they knew too much about that. That idea really wasn't there. They were more or less looking at a covered shopping center, a shopping mall near where the Galleria is today in Houston. Yeah. They had the Houston Buffs were in town for many decades. And they had played at West End Park, which is over by the Allen Center in downtown now. There's a power station there. Home plate is the freeway. I-45 runs right over where home plate used to be. And then they moved to Buff Stadium, or Buffalo Stadium, which is over there across the street from, or the site is across from University of Houston. And that was very popular. The Texas League was very popular, but they wanted to get Major League Baseball. They wanted to not be in the same standings with Dallas, not have Houston and Dallas in the same standings. So in the mid-50s, they started to put this idea together of how to get Major League Baseball in Houston. And there was a huge opposition to it because, you had to invest a lot of money. You had to get a stadium deal done. There were a lot of factors involved with that. And the founding fathers, George Kirksey and Craig Cullinan. George Kirksey was a sports writer in Houston, and Craig Cullinan was the heir to Texaco back then. And he knew all the people in the boardrooms, the business leaders in Houston. And so they got together trying to go into those corporate conference rooms and meet with people to try and get investors into this Houston Sports Association so they can get a major league club here. But they were always met with the conundrum. It's like, on one hand, with Major League Baseball, it's like, get us a stadium deal, and over here with the business leaders, it's like, get us a team. And how do you make that happen? So what they did is they enlisted R.E. Bob Smith, and he was a landowner in Houston. He owned more land in Houston than anybody else. R.E. stands for Robert Everett, Bob Smith for short. And he enlisted. He told the guys, he said, if you want me to join the Houston Sports Association, that's great, but you really need Roy Hoffines. And Roy Hoffines was a former mayor. He was a former county judge. He had been a lawyer at 19. He was a county judge of Harris County at 24. He'd worked with Lyndon Johnson as a script writer. I mean, he was a real dynamo. He was a real promoter. He was a very eloquent speaker. He was a promoter. He's very creative. And he rubbed people the wrong way sometimes. They tried to impeach him in Houston as a mayor. He was integral in desegregation of Houston and in bringing down all the signs, and literally just kind of overnight, Houston was not segregated anymore without any real fanfare. And that's the way they wanted it. They didn't want it to look like other cities. So he was used to doing things that were different, that were outside the box, that were progressive, that were revolutionary. And so when he joined the Houston Sports Association, him and R.E. Bob Smith had been looking at building a shopping center. All the shopping centers in Houston were outdoor, kind of like you see an outlet mall now where they're outdoors. That's the way all the shopping centers were. There were no indoor malls or anything like that, nothing air conditioned. So they were looking at building in what was the Yorktown area. And you might be familiar with that street named Yorktown. It's over there in the Galleria area. And all that area used to be farmland and country. It's kind of like if you go out to 99 and whatever now, that's kind of the way Loop 610 and Westheimer used to look back then. And so they were trying to put this idea together of putting together a shopping mall, but just a few miles away down Highway 59, Frank Sharp had already gotten Sharpstown off of the ground. And so Huffine said, well, there's not enough room in Houston right now for 2 shopping centers. But he had done it a lot, so he pulled back on that. He said, but, because this area is ripe for a shopping center. This area right here, what's going to be a highway, which became Loop 610 and all of that, he goes, this is a ripe development. There was already a television station over there, which is now KPRC TV, one of the stations right there by the Williams Tower. It was an area that was really growing. Again, it was very country, very farmland, but he could see the future, and this was a destination. So part of that design was to put air conditioning and bring all the shopping center indoors, and to actually build a dome over this shopping center, a geodesic dome, which, if you're familiar with it, it's very, very rounded. It's, kind of think of the Sphere in Vegas now. A geodesic dome is more of a circular type of ball instead of a gradual kind of massive dome like what we are familiar with today with the Astrodome. And, he was right, because then, like I said, the Galleria eventually got built. It opened in 1970, and that was literally 10 years later. He was not part of it at that time, but he was right, and the Galleria was a whole revolutionary mall in itself. But they took that idea of okay, you guys won a major league club in Houston, but you need a stadium. How are you going to sell that in Houston? Because we live in a subtropical climate. It rains, real easily in the afternoon, especially in the summertime. You can have a deluge, you can have a derecho or whatever it is like we had last year. And then, in an hour later, with all the branches all over the place, you're ready to play ball. But, how do you do that? So they took the ideas of putting a stadium together and getting the engineering right to put a roof over it. And that was a monumental task. They looked at all different types of roof structures. Building a stadium structure is relatively easy, but how do you put a roof, a dome roof that has compression on it and all those tons of steel? How do you make that happen? And they couldn't make it happen. And all these other places, like I said, New York, in Brooklyn, it was a great idea. And I saw, you look at the renderings, you can Google them. It's like, I look at those things today and I'm like, there's no engineering in this. They never could have built it like that. It looks great. And like I said, you can have all the creativity in the world, but how do you make something a reality? And that's what was the differential in Houston, is that they actually had the guts to follow through with it, to believe in it, to sell it, because of our climate here in Houston, because of the rain, because, baseball was already popular. It would, this would be the first building ever built in Houston, brand new, that would not be segregated. It was going to be revolutionary. The only other structure of its kind that had a dome on it is the Pantheon, and that's less than half the size of what the Astrodome is. And so this was really unprecedented. And so the fact that they fabricated steel, they got, American Bridge to fabricate all the steel, all the iron workers to start lifting it in place and bolting it. I mean, it was revolutionary to have that happen. It was beyond Houston. It was beyond Texas, although, it is very Texan. It's very Houston can-do spirit. But it was really a great American story of American progression and revolutionary structures, because it was repeated all over the world. And in the story, just to air condition that space was a feat in itself. There were no plans for anything like this. You had to invent it all. You had to design it, and get, even the best engineers and architects, they had a tough time figuring it out. And they did a fantastic job. The Astrodome is a circular building. It's really a 5 or 6 concentric circles of lines that form a circle, and it's a beautiful, shape. It's symmetrical. It's very seamless, and it's part of the engineering firm that built Shea Stadium in New York worked on the Astrodome as well. So that was kind of used as a sister design for the bottom part of the Astrodome. But yeah, I mean, it was the structure itself that was revolutionary. Like the architecture, the engineering did not exist. And then to put baseball indoors, that right there is just a crazy idea. To have a scoreboard as big as you did, to have a volume of air conditioning, 6,600 tons of air. Dyken Park has more than that today. But Dyken Park is a retractable roof stadium, so it lets a lot of heat in. The Astrodome is a permanent roof, so comparable. It didn't take as much tonnage of air conditioning to cool that building down, although it did get hot in there when the air was off back when I was working there. And just the AstroTurf, the theater type seats, the restaurants, the skyboxes, the entire experience, the design of the building. Half of the crowd walks down to their seats, the other half walks up, so that way you don't have all. If you go to NRG Stadium, everybody's entering at grade level, and everybody has to either walk up or down all at the same time, and you have this clog of a crowd, trying to get in and out. And that's partially due because the Astrodome is there, and all the not sewage, but the sewers and the sewage. The sewers, like the pipes and everything they still run underneath NRG Stadium. And so, it was very revolutionary.
Yeah. Well, and the creation of AstroTurf, kind of a happy accident in some ways, I guess.
Not really. Excuse me. AstroTurf, so they knew at one point that they were going to need to have some sort of artificial surface. The intention was to get natural grass into the Astrodome, and it would grow. But one of the things that they needed to have happen was the dome was going to be multi-purpose. It was going to be able to handle football and rodeo, concerts, all, you name it. You've seen it. Basketball, they had soccer
tennis
in
matches.
there. Tennis matches, boxing, all that stuff in there. They needed 150 events to be in the Astrodome to break even. So they were trying to get anything and everything big that they could put into the dome that was spectacular, that would add to the lore of the Astrodome. And that was in addition to the baseball dates, the 80 baseball or 81 baseball games at the time. And the AstroTurf, they felt that it was a little too radical to do it in year one. And so they tried to grow grass. They had grass come in from Texas A&M, the grass farm that was out there in that area near College Station and Bryan. And when they brought it into the dome, it looked great. They put it out there, it started to grow, and then they had a problem with the glare coming through the skylights. And the skylights, there's 4,596 skylights that are 3 foot by 7 foot on the roof of the Astrodome. And the skylights are lucite, and there's a diffuser. So you have a top layer and you have a bottom layer, and you have the top layer of lucite and the bottom layer is a diffuser, because you have this the steel structure of the Astrodome that if the light was just to come in through clear windows, you would see shadows all over the field. You would have beams and all that pattern of, it's a diamond pattern. It's called lamella, is what that dome structure is. But you would see that all over the field. And if you look at some of the construction photos of the dome, you can see that. And so they use this diffuser so that way the light would be distributed interior, almost like a greenhouse in a way. And it would be good for the grass, and the air conditioning would add to the grass growth. But once they had a problem with the glare coming through, there was an intense amount of glare. It was like the diffuser actually did the opposite. It was like looking at the sun times 5 or something like that. It was incredibly blinding. So, and if even today, there's a couple of the windows that are, the diffuser is off a couple of the windows. If you're inside the Astrodome in the afternoon, you can see that sunshine coming through there, and it is intensely bright. It really is. So I can just imagine what it was like to have the whole roof like that. So when they had to paint the roof, when the dome opened, luckily there was a panic when the dome was about to open on April 9th of 1965. They were going to have an exhibition game with the Yankees, and then they were also going to have 3 games with the Yankees and 2 games with the Baltimore Orioles. So it was going to be a 5-game set of exhibition games over Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday. They were going to play double headers with the Yankees in Baltimore on Saturday and Sunday. And then they had opening night on Monday. And the thing about it was the weather was overcast in Houston that weekend. So they weren't going to have a huge problem with the sun glare that weekend, although they had prepared orange baseballs and some other things. And so opening night was a night game, so they didn't have to worry about it then either. So, but then it was weird because you had those 5 exhibition games, and then you had opening night, the first opening night on Monday, the 12th, and then the Astros went out on the road. And they were gone for like 10 days. And in those 10 days is when they solved the issue of the glare on the roof. They put like 700 gallons of white paint. They put 3 coats of paint in the panels that were kind of behind home plate. If you can imagine a pie, like a pizza with 12 pieces, 1/6 of that was painted 3 times and the rest of it was painted once. And that reduced the glare. So when the Astros came back, they didn't have as much problems, but it was still there, and they had to paint it again. And then so throughout that first season, because they started out like that, the grass started to die because it no longer had the right amount of sun, and that was a problem. I mean, the Astrodome was beautifully designed, and everything worked in it fine. But there was, of course, it's the first of its kind. And there were some of these issues that they had, and they had these workarounds. So, they would replace some of the grass as the season went along. Artificial turf was not going to be available that year. They had to put sawdust down in the outfield. They had to spray paint the field to make it look like it was grass. They said it was extremely hard. It was extremely dusty. They did the best they could in that first season. And if you look at some pictures, there are some color pictures from 1965. You can see the patches, where they were fighting it all year long. So going into the off season, into 66, Monsanto, they came to Houston. That's a long story there, but they came to Houston. And one night in January of 66, they had this secret meeting of sorts in the Dome, and they had prepared a huge square of AstroTurf, which was the area, like if you're looking at a baseball diamond, the area that's around the pitcher's mound, that extends to first, second, third, and back to home, just that area of grass. It was that, and they had placed it down on the field. They were getting ready for the first rodeo to take place in the Astrodome, so the seats were in different configuration. The whole floor was dirt, and the floor was dirt actually back then. I mean, when they took out the grass, there was no concrete floor; it was just dirt. So they put this AstroTurf infield, so to speak, down, and they brought in some of the Astros players, like Bob Aspromonte. He was there. Some U of H players, some football players, and they bounced the ball. They ran on it. They threw a football around, and Roy Hoffines, who was there, and he was kind of leading the charge on this. He said, "This is what we're going to do," and it kind of took wow. the Monsanto guys by surprise because they didn't expect it to be that quick. They didn't expect that they were going to have. So they had to get. They needed time to prepare a full baseball field's worth of AstroTurf because a baseball field itself, just in fair territory, is about 2.1 acres of land. So that's a lot of AstroTurf. Even if with all the dirt paths, on the infield and everything else, that's a lot of space to cover. And then you have the hips of the field, the foul territory and behind home plate. So they had to get all that prepared. So what they were able to do when the season started in 66 is they only had the infield. They had the baseball hips behind home plate and then the area around in the infield. And then by July, I think it was around mid-July, that's when they covered the rest of the field in the outfield, and they had it done there. There was also this little rumor, and I think there is something to it, but I think it was downgraded real fast. Hoffines was a guy who was very, again, outside the box type of guy, and there was no rule because nobody had ever used AstroTurf before. there was no rule that said that the field had to be green. So there was a thought process that's like, what if the infield is one color, the outfield's another color, and the foul territory is another color?
Wow.
That would have been a huge clash of colors with all those, rainbow color of seats that were in the dome. So, that was by the time turf finally came around, it's 1 year later, it solved. It brought solution to some of those real big problems.
No. The Boise State of baseball fields right there.
Yeah.
Grandfathered in there.
Yeah.
So Roy Hoffines, he had a suite or he had an apartment there at the Astrodome, or was it? What are the other?
So he had so the Dome had skyboxes. It was First Stadium. You actually can go back to the Palace of the Fans in the late 1800s with the Cincinnati Reds. And they had some of these kind of, at the time, they were kind of fancy boxes. They were exclusive boxes, but they weren't skyboxes. They weren't suites or anything like that. They were just more like a kind of a, you look at the Diamond Club today where people are just kind of sitting there. There was no restaurant or anything like that hooked up to it. The Dome was the first place to have true skyboxes, these suites. And in the area where they built them in the Dome at the top at level 9, that area was an afterthought because they were supposed to only have air conditioning ductwork up there in that level. And Roy Hoffines saw that there was a lot of empty space, and he said, "What are we doing with this?" Well, it's where we're projecting air from above the upper deck out into the main arena. He said, well, what if we were to raise those air ducts up and we were to put a seating deck up there and put the most expensive seats in the house there? And so they had 53 skyboxes. They were all individually designed. They were based on the travels of Roy Hoffines. Now, Roy Hoffines was the president of the Astros. Now, you have to understand his personality. He was the guy who was charged with being the front-facing, public-facing guy. And he had a lot of creativity. And sometimes that creativity would be misinterpreted as ego, or it was harsh, and he would, just butt heads with people. That's what happened between he and Ari Bob Smith. And, they were together in the Houston Sports Association. Craig Cullinan, who was in the Houston Sports Association, he left. George Kirksey, who was the original guy, the sports writer, he left in 1966. So Hoffines, by 1966, was the sole guy from the original 4. There was a whole board of guys in the Houston Sports Association, but he was the last one. He was the true owner. But when they were planning all this, he had this idea for these suites and skyboxes, and he had them design them after his world travels. So you had stuff that looked like things from Europe, from Asia, from all over the place, even in the United States and Texas type themes. Not one of these suites looked the same. They all had a name and they all had a different theme. And it was a big deal as to which skybox you had because you could show it off to different people as your guests. So that being said, he had this suite that was separate from the skyboxes, but in that same theory, and it was only on 2 levels at first. It was on level 7 and 7.5, and it was opened in the first year, and the Astros paid for it. This was something that the county, the taxpayers did not pay for. All of these extra things that went into the Astrodome, like the upgrades on the seats, the theater type seats, the skyboxes, the furnishings, the scoreboard, all of those things were paid for out of the pocket of the Astros. The county, the bonds from the county, they paid for the physical structure and everything that needed to go to make the Astrodome a possibility. So he built this suite, and they had gold chairs. That's where the president sat on opening night of that first game in 1965 against the Yankees. He had a full kitchen. He had a bed in there, a bedroom, and then what they did was he had plans to expand it. This was, like I said, it was in about the whole area was about 60 feet wide. It was about 20 feet by 60 feet. And the space that they expanded to was more like 20 feet by 120 feet. and they expanded it from level 5 all the way up to 9, and even a little bit back behind the scoreboard. And what they built, this came about in 1968 when they expanded the suite. They put a billiards room in there. They put a saloon, a barber shop,
oh my gosh,
like a hair salon. They had a kids' game room. They had a New Orleans style cafe. They had numerous bedrooms. They had a full presidential suite that was designed for Lyndon Johnson and his daughters. And it actually had a working red phone to Washington at one point that they had approval for. Yeah. And all of these private, just kind of entertainment areas that and this was all designed by, if you've ever seen Willy Wonka, there's a guy named Harper Goff who is a set designer. He worked for Disney and he designed all the sets, everything that you from the first Disneyland and first Disney World. He did all of those for Walt Disney, and then he went and worked. He was in Hollywood. He did like the sets for Willy Wonka, and he was hired by Hofheinz to come here and do the same thing. And he wanted something completely different, something that was going to wow people, that they were never going to forget, and that's what he did. So he had the suite there, and they used it for entertaining. They had conference rooms in there. I mean, it was pretty extravagant. It was a multi-level suite, and he actually lived in there for a short amount of time. And his second wife, his first wife died of a brain aneurysm at the end of 1965, and his second wife recalled seeing the sunlight coming out over the dome and seeing the seats kind of light up in the morning. And so that's quite a sunrise to see. But yeah, there was a suite in there.
What a wild ballpark.
Yeah.
I mean, so I want to fast forward because you spent a lot of time at the current Dyken Park. You worked for the Astros for a number of years. Talk about what Dyken Park kind of is to you. Is it how does it compare to the Astrodome? It's obviously a very different ballpark, but there's some similarities in some ways. But like, where do you kind of put Dyken Park as far as a baseball team's home? How would you rate it?
Well, I think Dyken Park is a beautiful ballpark. It's fantastic. I think it's in better shape now than it was back when it first opened. I think it's a lot better. It's a lot more interactive. It's certainly more well branded to the Astros than it was back in 2000. When we were moving from the Astrodome to what was in Enron Field, I remember the whole process. In 1999, the whole process, we had heard there was some talk that we knew we were changing the team colors, but we didn't know what exactly. And then we started to hear rumors of red and pinstripes and all this stuff that was like totally against anything you had seen with the Astros before.
Right.
And when we went into Enron Field, I remember walking in there and I had a cubicle at that time, and I was the first one to pull the plastic off my chair. And I was the first one to sit in all this furniture. Everything was brand new. You could smell the paint. The carpets were perfect. And it had that wild kind of 90s kind of amoeba looking stuff, kind of things, and kind of earthy colors. And it was also a stadium that was very clean. And what I mean by clean is, like I was just saying, it wasn't branded. There was only one sign that had the Astros logo. And at the time, that Astros logo was the new one. It was the one with the script, the word mark, the Astros with the open red star. And it was above the video screen in center field. And everywhere you walked, there was no Astro logo. And I was like, wow, we don't even have, there's no players. There's nothing. Like it's a very nice ballpark, but they had focused on wanting to go to a traditional type of ballpark. Like I remember Drayden McClain walking by. Well, we can play on natural grass or blue sky, and that was a big deal, in Houston to do that. Now of course for several years, the roof doesn't really ever open except for during the day when they're not playing ball games. But it was kind of a weird time I think I think that from a fan standpoint, there was a lot of excitement because it was a new ballpark. I think for somebody that was working inside and somebody that had um, the connection to, it was like, you know what? I remember walking in the dome and just thinking like, wow, we're just going to leave all this behind. Like, wow, like, this is, we're just doing that. It's like, this is happening, and this is the eighth wonder of the world, and there's nothing wrong with it. Other than, you could reconfigure some areas like they've done Dyken Park over the years. But there's really nothing wrong with the dome. And in retrospect, with the promise of always opening the retractable roof, which they don't do at all, it's like, you could have renovated the dome, but the attraction of a new ballpark at that time was going to bring a lot more money. And there was, what you had behind it was the talk of, look what they did in Baltimore, look what they did in Denver. They even said, look what they did in Phoenix as well. It's like, oh, these downtown ballparks are really bringing a lot of development to town. And it kind of was like that. It kind of was, but I mean, it took a good 18 to 20 years to get a lot of that done, and it's kind of, was it self-serving? Yeah, probably, because that's the reality of professional sports and team owners, but Dyken Park it's a beautiful ballpark. I've known the architect, the guy, I'm connected with him, and they did a great job. I think it was a good replacement for the Astrodome for the Astros. But I also feel that they could have stayed in the dome, and they could have retrofitted the dome and had a lot of. I did a whole plan for that too. What would the Astrodome look like today had they stayed and just renovated the dome, knowing what today, that they don't ever open up the roof, so you're going to have an indoor environment anyway. And then you would have had 6 years of legacy. You would have had, Cam Smith or, Jose Altuve playing, where Joe Morgan and Jimmy Wynn used to play, and you would have had that legacy. But, that's kind of, that's just the way professional sports are, and team owners, they like to make their own mark.
You have been involved in sort of helping to preserve the Astrodome, bringing it back in some ways. Like, just tell me what your role has been with that, and where you hope it can go into the future.
Well, I have been involved in the Astrodome for a long time. It's been with the Astros. It's been through the Astrodome Conservancy. It's been on my own. I'm on the board with the Astrodome Conservancy, the board of directors with the Astrodome Conservancy. Back in several years ago, they asked me to join the organization, and I wanted to bring I wanted to bring something to the organization to try to help bring a vision to the Astrodome, because I think that the Astrodome was a victim of itself as far as a business model goes, because the business model that it created was just pumped up on steroids over the years to the point where it couldn't catch up, and everybody wanted to move 1,000,000 miles an hour. And then we wind up with this, now we're talking 20 years later. I mean, they're not doing that with Dyken Park, but, just a replacement of these stadiums. And the Astrodome was extremely well built. And like I was saying earlier, it was the first of its kind. And it really put Houston on the international map. And it's not just the stadium. I got invited by Harris County Judge Ed Emmett back in 2017 to go speak at the State Senate Committee in Austin at the Capitol, and our mayor right now, John Whitmire, was in the Senate back then, and he was the dean of the Senate, and I went to go speak on behalf of the Harris County voters and talk about the Astrodome. And there was a lot of hatred in that room. It was really appalling to hear people who are elected. I was sitting there as a constituent essentially, and having to defend the public. The public are who elected these people, whether they voted or not. They're elected by the public. And I was pretty appalled by some of their attitudes. And they came at me with questions like, well, Mr. Acosta, we can tear down Yankee Stadium. Why can't we tear down the Astrodome? And I was thinking, man, we're sitting in the state capitol and you're talking about defending New York's Yankee Stadium over the Astrodome in Texas? I didn't even want to bring that up, but, because, but it was going through my head. So what I did was I told them the real story. And I said, what you should know as to why Yankee Stadium came out. First, Yankee Stadium was not the first of its kind. It didn't have any innovation as far as engineering goes. It's quite memorable. All the baseball players, everybody's very emotionally attached to the baseball players and baseball games. I said, but the Astrodome really changed this region of Texas and the world and put, what is now America's fourth largest city on the map. And we were already the fastest growing city and still have remained the fastest growing city in Texas and one of the fastest in the nation even today. I said, what happened was when they built the new Yankee Stadium right across the street from the previous one, that it was built on parkland, and they took away all that acreage of parks. And the city law said, okay, you can build the new stadium, but you're going to have to maintain the same acreage of land for parks. So they had to tear down the other stadium. And the other stadium, like I said, it had no super engineering to it. It was not revolutionary. There were some historical groups who wanted to preserve part of the exterior wall, but it just wasn't built in a way where it was feasible to do that. So they had to tear down the building because of city law dictated that. And, these guys with the state Senate committee, they didn't know that. They're just running their mouths and I just couldn't believe the guys in Texas, with the Texas Senate were doing that, and it was a political thing against Judge Ed Emmett.
Well, now we're at 60 years since the Astrodome opened. Is there anything that you've planned or anything that you hope is going to happen this year or just anything that's out there?
Well, there's there really isn't. I mean, the Astrodome Conservancy, we had our race for the dome back in about a month ago, I think it was in April, and that every year I think that's the fourth annual that we had. It's a great event. It's the biggest it's ever been. There's a lot. Now I hate to sound negative. I don't mean to sound negative, but that's a lot of the truth is what I was talking about. There are a lot of people in Houston that really love the Astrodome, but a lot of the key people, the state, there's a lot of key people involved that the money decision makers, that they're the ones, right? But there's a lot of people in Houston that really love the Astrodome, and an event like the race for the dome was a real presentation of that. People came out really excited. We have a cake out there every year, to sing happy birthday to the Astrodome. We cut the cake, and it was a lot of fun. It was cool. But other than that, there's not a lot. I have a media company called Houston City Beat, and I've made it a point to put a lot of content that is Astrodome related out there throughout the year. And so I've been doing some interviews with people, talking to people who were involved there. It's former broadcasters, or there was a guy who lost his father back when it was under construction. He fell from the roof. And you hear those stories. And so I'm just trying to get things out there from a content standpoint and stories on my own. If nobody else is going to do it, then I'm going to do it and have some fun with it throughout the year.
Well, I think we could talk about so many other things, and I was going to, but the Astrodome talk was so good and so rich. I feel like we have to talk about the Astrodome more in the future, but I don't want to keep you too much longer. So
you can go on if you want.
we could, but yeah. I'll end it here. But before we go, what else? What can you plug out there? Anything that you want to plug that you're doing, Houston City Beat or whatever else, for people to know more about what you're doing?
Yeah, well, Houston City Beat is the main thing that I'm doing. I do a lot of other things too. I do a lot of video production work, and that I do a lot of pretty much all the video production work for Houston City Beat, and we do stories. My partner, who's also my girlfriend, she does a lot of the web stuff, and she does a lot of other things for Houston City Beat. We put a lot of effort into Houston City Beat.
HoustonCityBeat.com, and that's Mike Acosta. And thank you so much. This was awesome. And again, we'll have to get you back on to talk about
absolutely part
other
two.
Astro stuff for sure.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, Mike. You can follow Take Me Out on Facebook, facebook.com/TakeMeOutPod. We're also on Instagram at TakeMeOutPod. And we're on YouTube. Hello, YouTube. At youtube.com/TakeMeOutPod. Patreon is coming soon. I promise you. We're talking about it. We have just about everything set up. We just got to dot a few I's, cross a few T's, and get that puppy launched. In the meantime, you can still follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Please, 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 5-star ratings are your friend, and they're our friend. Share, like, comment, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your seat buddy at the game with you. Come join us. We're having a good time here, and you'll might learn something new. Who knows?
If you know anybody who likes ballparks, likes to travel to ballparks, is making any road trips to ballparks this year, or if you know people who are just big baseball fans and they're looking for a new podcast, we are your podcast. Go follow us on all podcast apps and podcast platforms. Tell your friends that you could just find us anywhere. Take Me Out is the name. That's it. That's all you got to know.
Oh, and have we mentioned the book today? The
Ballpark
Road Trips? We haven't talked this about today. Oh my gosh.
Baseball Road Trips, which is my book, and it's not actually, it's like on my shelf. It's back there somewhere.
You had to move it for the Mother's Day weekend and the family in town.
We had in-laws over, and so I had to put stuff away because they had to sleep here. But yes, the book is Baseball Road Trips. It is the official guide to the ballparks and what to do around the ballparks, where the cities where the ballparks are. I should do that. Like, it's my elevator pitch. I should know that, like, off the bat. Not even thinking. But it is the official guide to everything ballpark travel. Where to eat, where to drink, what to do, where to stay, how to have fun, wherever there's a major league ballpark, and in some cases minor league ballparks. So that is the book, Baseball Road Trips. You can go find it anywhere you find books, and online or in store. Ask your local bookstore for it. If they don't have it, they can order a copy for you. You can go find it in any big bookstore, any of the big chains. They are on the shelves. Trust me, I've had people text me. They're still there. So Baseball Road Trips is the book. Find it, buy it. Help me make money for my family. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Back here on Take Me Out, last segment this week, it was announced, Alex, that the New York Rangers will visit the Florida Panthers. This is ice hockey, by the way, the National Hockey League. The Rangers will host the Panthers in the 2026 NHL Winter Classic. I'm sure you've heard of this event. It'll be at Lone Depot Park this year. See, the Panthers are hosting it. The Florida Panthers are out of Miami. They're actually out of, I think, Sunrise, Florida, I believe. Lone Depot is going to be hosting it. It's set for January 2nd, and it will be outdoors, which means the roof will be open at Lone Depot. The Winter Classic began in 2008 and, at first, took place in cooler climate locations, but it has since kind of migrated to the south a little bit more. Other major league parks that have hosted the Winter Classic include Wrigley Field, T-Mobile Park in Seattle, Fenway Park, Target Field in Minneapolis, Citi Field in New York, Busch Stadium in St. Louis, Nationals Park in D.C., and Citizens Bank Park in Philly. The NHL has also run games as part of the Stadium Series in Dodger Stadium and Yankee Stadium and Coors Field in Denver. So the NHL has basically been at about half the parks at this point, so that's pretty cool. But my question, Alex, is yes, the NHL has their series of games at baseball stadiums once in a while, and, pro wrestling is doing some baseball stadium stuff. WWE is coming to Petco Park this November for their Survivor Series event. What other, big U.S. or Canadian, North American event, could be sporting event, could be anything, what big event should be taking place annually or often or whatever at a major league ballpark?
Man, that's kind of a tough question because, there's concerts that happen all the time there that happen to sometimes destroy the field.
No, concerts happen at all baseball.
Yeah.
So that's one thing, right? Like concerts, yeah, okay. But think outside the box is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
What kind of events that are not at ballparks?
Oh, I know. I've seen it. I think I don't know. Do they still have the Pinstripe Bowl, which is a college bowl game?
The College Bowl, yeah, that's at Yankee Stadium. That's
correct.
Yes, they do that.
Yeah.
I don't know if there are other ballparks that are used for college football bowl games now. I mean, they used to be.
It's just a strange area, strange space to convert it to a football field.
Veterans Stadium. I mean, in the era of the multi-purpose stadium, Veterans Stadium in Philadelphia hosted the Army-Navy game for several years. Famously, a bunch of cadets fell down from the railing because the railing broke off, and they fell all the way down to the field, like 10 feet, big drop. They all lived. It was okay, but this was a terrible thing. Also, the turf once was like really too hard to play on or something, and they had to move the Army Navy. I mean, it was a bad place to play any sport. Like RFK Stadium, where the Nationals played that one year and the Senators played back in the day. I'm sure they hosted NFL games, right? Like NFL games have been in baseball stadiums in the past.
Right.
So let's think outside the box, right? Like what can we put in a baseball stadium that has not been put in the baseball stadium yet?
Maybe in the off season we can convert a baseball stadium to a giant putt golf course. Is that outside the box?
They do
those things though. Yeah.
Have you seen like the driving range stuff? Like you can play, you can hit off of the upper deck and onto the field. And they do this at Petco Park has done it, I believe.
I believe Dakins Park's done it. Yeah, I've seen ads for that. But I think you just do it like on the field though. Just like not rip it up, but like conserve everything. But maybe build it in the field so you can go on the field and play it. That could be fun.
I think that's not a bad idea. Turn a ball field into a putt or minor league, a mini golf. That's what it's called.
Yeah.
What about the Academy Awards? Could you have the Academy Awards at Dodger Stadium?
Wow, that could be fancy. Like, would you do like a giant white tent?
I mean, sure, if you want to do a white tent, but I would just say, do you need a tent?
I don't know. Well, not in LA because it doesn't rain that much.
The weather should be fine.
Yeah, I could see the Academy Awards. I could also see, speaking of award shows, the Grammys would be good because there's so much room for stages over there as well.
You put the Grammys at Progressive Field in Cleveland.
Oh yeah, the Progressive Field could host like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony could be there.
What if they put the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony the same weekend as the Grammy Awards, and they did that all like in one weekend at Progressive Field? That
could be really interesting. And like, would you keep it there every year, or would you tour? I think you would definitely want to keep it there every year.
I mean, if you're making Cleveland the city where the Hall of Fame is and the Rock, it's a
yeah.
Sure.
I wonder how Cleveland ended up with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame anyways. But yeah, that would be really cool. I mean, that's one of the things I still want to go check out, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It'd be really fun to check that out.
Or what if we do like the July 4th Coney Island hot dog eating contest at Citi Field?
Citi Field, that would be great because
across Queens and just do it.
Yeah, and you could project it on their giant scoreboard there too. So no matter where your seats are, you can see it perfectly.
1,000 square foot scoreboard.
Yeah, you see Joey Chestnut, his giant face on the screen there. That'd be great.
People throwing up on that scoreboard.
Yeah, okay, that's great.
I mean, that's what they do there. People throw up in that contest.
They do, yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I don't like to watch it.
Here's a good one. Good one. The Westminster Kennel Club Dog Show.
Yes.
At Yankee Stadium.
Yes. Just all the dogs. Just let the dogs have the place. I would love that. Yeah. I would love that.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine them filling like adding seats and like filling Yankee like 60,000 people, just dog fans like.
Oh my God, I'm going crazy! Oh no, I would if I was there, I'd go wild.
Go crazy. That's true.
Oh man, that would be great. Yeah, I would dig that. I would actually try to go up for that. That'd be a lot of fun. Just grab a beer, grab a popcorn, and just watch the dogs. And eat a hot dog while you're doing it too.
Okay, can we think of one more thing that they could have at a ballpark? One more thing.
I don't know why I'm thinking of roller derby right now because it's more. That's roller derby because roller derby's not that big here though.
Yeah, it's had spikes in interest, but yeah, it hasn't really been.
I mean, I think speaking of ice hockey, just having like World Championship of figure skating like at Yankee Stadium or at Citizens Bank Park could be good
figure
too.
Figure skating would be good. Or what? Or like bowling.
How many lanes would fit into a baseball field?
No, you just do one.
Oh, just one.
You just put one lane between like the mound and home plate. It's just one lane, and everybody like fills in the stadium, just watches that one lane.
Oh my gosh, no pressure to that one guy or gal, but that's just thinking about it reminds me of how like they will do like the Final Four at football stadiums, which is like you have a small basketball court in the middle of this giant football stadium, and you think of people in the nosebleeds, like, how are they seeing this? Like, it's just like such a small court in such a big area, and it just blows my mind how that works.
Well, wasn't like the greatest basketball game of all time, greatest college basketball game of all time, quote unquote, what, San Francisco versus, I forget, UCLA. I forget. It was some game back in like the 60s, early 70s. It was at the Astrodome, wasn't it?
Was it? Okay, I don't remember. I do know, I think, was it in 2017 when Houston hosted the Final Four and Villanova won on, I think it was a 3-point buzzer beater, won the championship?
I know that game. That is one of the greatest moments of my sporting life. I grew up a Philadelphia college basketball fan, but like Villanova was my number one team. And so I've always been a Villanova fan. And the Chris Jenkins shot is like one of the greatest like moments that I've ever like experienced in my life. I was at a bar with my friend who also a huge Villanova fan. And we were in New York at a bar and we watched the game, just the two of us together over beers. And like, we like were hugging and having the best night of our life. It was incredible.
Oh, how happy. That's awesome for you. Yeah, that was in Houston. That was in 2017. And then I remember we had that snowstorm, and then we hosted the Super Bowl where the Patriots came back from losing to the Eagles horribly, and then Hurricane Harvey, and then the Astros won the World Series. It was 2017 was the year. But yeah, I mean, it's, you know what? Yeah, let's do a single bowling lane in the middle of Yankee Stadium, or let's do it in the bigger park. Let's do that at a Globe Life Field, because I think there is a bowling Hall of Fame in Arlington, if I'm not to be mistaken. There is a bowling, like I think, a Hall of Fame associations in Arlington.
That would be the perfect spot. There would be a bowling Hall of Fame there in DFW. Yeah.
You got that. You got the Six Flags, and you got the Cowboys, and you got the Rangers. There you go.
Just to know, just to kind of close up the circle here. Yes, the greatest college basketball game of all time, the game of the century, is what they called it. January 20th, 1968, between UCLA and Houston Cougars. It was at the Astrodome. So yeah, it was like the game that sort of like defined modern day college basketball. It started like basically the new era where Houston beat UCLA by 2 points, and it was an incredible game, and it was at the Astrodome. So there you go. I wanted to get that out there because we talked about the Astrodome all episode, and there we are. We finished with the Astrodome.
You did it. That's great.
We did it. We closed the circle. All right. Well, that's it for this episode of Take Me Out. We will be back here next week, and we will go around the ballpark and go through the league. And, we should do it like they did back in This Week in Baseball. It's like around. I don't know. It's some voice.
Do like the 1940s like style propaganda film kind of a thing with a black and white with a little airplane that's clearly held by a stick that goes around the globe, you know?
Yeah.
Perfect. I'll come up with that real fast.
Yeah, that's right. So we'll do that next week. We'll go through the league and see what is new and fresh and hot and fun and funny and all those things that have happened in the ballpark in the last month. And we'll talk about those news stories and talk about all the fun things. And that'll be our episode next week. It'll take me out. But until then, thank you for listening. We really appreciate it. I am Tim.
And I'm Alex. And it's baseball season.
Check you next week.
See y'all.